Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in San Diego. I started my California tour back a month ago in Orange County, and then I went to Santa Barbara after that. Then I went to Los Angeles. And this is the first time I have seen sunshine in California. I didn't think it happened. You guys were making me feel like home with all the rain that I had. Anyways, it's great to be here. Thank you very much, Beverly, for having me. How many people here have had a near-death experience? Okay, a couple of us. Did any of you go through the light? Okay. Beverly, when you were there, did you want to come back? No, exactly. And I'm going to talk about that. I had my near-death experience on June 21st, 1996. Prior to that, I was a banker. I was as left-brained as one could be. I grew up an only child, wonderful parents, and I was taught that success equated with money. And I ended up having my own insurance agency. I had my own brokerage firm. I managed in excess of $200 million of my clients' funds. And I was at the top of the game in my country, one could say. This is back in the early 90s. And I went on a cruise with one of the fund managers down to the Caribbean. And he was the top kind of financial guru in the country. And he called me over and he said, JC, we've been watching you. We've been watching you with what you're doing, and we're really impressed. And what is it that you do? And so what I did was I told him about this age balance indicator that I had put together, that based on a person's age, they have so much in risk and so much in safety. And I do the same thing for everybody. It's just based on their age. And when I pull one investment, I pull it for everybody. And he says to me, well, that's interesting. But you really want to know how we play the game? Well, I'm all ears at this point, right? I said, sure, yes, please tell me, how do you play the game? He says, well, this is what we do. We buy companies in their earliest stages. We get them in what is called seed capital. We pay pennies for these stocks. And what we do is we monitor the progress. And when something comes up that could be of some significance, what we do is we tell you brokers. And you brokers drive up the price. And you know what we're doing then? We're selling our stock. That's how we play the game. Well, when he said that to me, it was like somebody just shot me, because I just didn't want to be in this industry any longer. And this was back in 1993. And I proceeded to sell my companies. I moved out of the energy of Vancouver up to a very, very remote location in a small little town called Bella Coola, British Columbia. I built my own log house. I had my own power system, put in my own power system. I had a glacier above me in the runoff. I was able to put a dam up there and got the water, put it in my turbine, and I had my own power. I had so much power that the first year that I was there, I had an outdoor pool that was about 4 foot tall. And in the middle of January, when it was minus 20 degrees outside, my pool was 98 degrees. I was swimming in January from the excess power that I had. But it was there that I had my near-death experience. It was in 1996. I was bucking some wood on June 25th with a chainsaw. And the chainsaw kicked back, and went through my throat. And it hung up on me right here. And you might be able to see the scar if you look closely. It ended up hitting my collarbone and my chin bone. And doctors said that it missed my jugular by no more than the thickness of a piece of paper. They had no idea how that happened. But the moment that it happened, I intuitively heard a voice that said, everything's going to be okay. I have a purpose for your life. And at that point in time, it was like I was in a Zen-like state. Everything just kind of slowed right down. It was just like everything was moving in slow motion. And I had one fellow who was working for me. He took me and he grabbed me by the arm and he drove me into the hospital. Now, in Bella Coola, the hospital is nothing more than a medical outpost. There's 3 doctors there, It's 45 minutes into town. One road. We're driving down the road. Steve sees the ambulance coming up the other way, puts his arms out, waves the ambulance down. The ambulance turns around, pulls behind. We're parked at the side of the car. He says to me, I want you to stay here. Well, if any of you know me, you don't tell me to stay here. That means go. So what I did was, after about 20 seconds, I just got out, walked around the end of his truck, past the ambulance, and he was talking to the ambulance attendant. Well, the ambulance attendant sees me, and I'm holding a compress on my throat like this, blood everywhere. Her eyes just became saucers. They just lit up. She goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I want to go to the hospital. Can you take me?" She goes, "Get in." So I'm lying down in the hospital, 20 minutes into the hospital. She asked me 8 times what your name is, because at this point she thinks I'm going to pass out and die on her, right? Get into the hospital. She again asked me as we're going into the emergency room, "What's your name?" And this is when I said to her, I said, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." Well, now she thinks I'm delirious and ready to die. But anyways, I move into the hospital. The emergency room was on the left, lifting me off the stretcher onto the bed. There was one doctor to my right, one doctor to my left. I'm lying here looking up at the doctor, looking up at the nurse. The nurse hands the doctor this little packet. Doctor's like, "What the hell's that?" He says, "Well, it's an antiseptic." "Oh, yeah, go ahead, put it on." And then, and forgive my crudeness here, but it was, the doctor looked like he was going fishing, because he had this hook, and there was this little eye at the top, and he had this thread, and he's going like this. He couldn't find it. He couldn't find the little hole to put the suture in. And this is when I said to him, "Everything's going to be okay." So he hands it across to the nurse. The nurse finds it, puts it in. The nurse hands it back to the doctor. The very second the doctor gets it, he makes a motion towards me. And now I'm not looking at him like this. I'm at the top of the room. I'm looking down. I see the backs of the head of the nurse. I see myself, and for the first time, it was like raw steak. It was just open up, blood everywhere. And then the very next second, I realized that I wasn't in that dimension of time. I was now in black space. That's all it was, just total blackness. And what the blackness did was it revealed a little twinkling of a light. You ever see that first star at night? Well, that's what it was. And I just watched it. And as I watched it, it continued to grow. It continued to get brighter and brighter and brighter until it became an all-encompassing white light. And I, boom, went through it. When I went through it, I landed on the top of a mountain. It was the very second that I went through it, I knew I was home, just like Beverly felt here. When you go through that light, you don't want to come back because you know you're home. Because what's on that other side is the energetic essence of who our life force is. And that's where I was. I was in that zone. And when I looked down, I didn't have a body, but I felt a presence just touch me on where my left elbow would be. And it directed me to look to the left, go down the mountain. I went down the mountain, moved at about 1 o'clock, and I remember seeing this structure start to appear. It was a round structure, and as I got closer, there was a fence that enveloped it, and as I got closer to the fence, the doors just opened up. And I went inside that yard, and as I came to the door just opened up. And as it opened up, I went in, and I knew that I had to go to the right. There was a stairway that was along the right-hand wall. There's no railing. I went up, and I wasn't walking. I was floating, right? I was just kind of moving along. So I go up, and I go down this hallway. The first room I see on the right, it was this big, round, circular room. I've come to call it the Library of Souls. okay, and it looked like little CD sleeves, okay, and they were just kind of like moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out, and I'm gonna try to get this, take it off. I want to show you what they were moving in and out, yeah, but it looked like, I'm not an artist here, so please forgive me, but they were like that. And what I have found out and remembered, and you'll know why I say this as we go on, is that in each one of these is a soul. And this represents our spirit, which is a fragment, an energetic fragment of 100% consciousness of Source, and we'll get into that in a moment. But near-death experiences go through one of 3 time zones. Beverly, I'm sure you know individuals who have had a near-death experience, and during that near-death experience, they stayed in their earthly reality. They may have had an experience in a hospital, and they're now at the top of the hospital. They remember every single thing that happened as a result of that near-death experience. That's a near-death experience in the mind time zone. The next element of time is the veil of time. And in the veil of time zone, Raymond Moody described this as a tunnel. Now, I do a lot of work with people in this dimension, and not too many people have gone through tunnels or go into tunnels, but they go into this big void, this big black void. I come to call that the veil of time, and as we move on today, I'll tell you why. And then through the light is something that I call the element of heart time. Those are the 3 elements of timelessness that NDEs go through. Now, my near-death experience took me past that library of souls. It allowed me to look on the left-hand side, and I looked in and I saw 4 entities. They looked like human form. I never saw their face, but they were sitting cross-legged like this, one at 3, 6, 9, and 12, looking at each other. They had like hoodies on, and that was that. The next room, I went a little further down the hallway. I turned right, and as I turned right, it was a room of absolute blackness. And I sensed the door close behind me, but I never remembered seeing the door close behind me, but I sensed that it was closing, right? And then I felt a presence, a warmth, just start to come on me like that. And then little dots just started to appear. They were violet in color, and they formed a hexagon shape. Out of that hexagon shape, I call it in my book Violet Lightning, started to come out of it. And it joined together. When it joined together, it then formed an inner circle. Now, I'm going to age myself here. Maybe some of you might remember. Remember back in like the early 70s when you're watching TV at night, and at midnight it goes off and it starts snowing? Remember that? That snow? Well, that's what this was. It was just snow. And what I have since realized since then, that this was the asexuality of 100% consciousness. This, as you're going to find out, was its womb, and this was its consciousness. And what its consciousness did was it started communicating with me. Boom, like this. Everything was telepathic. And when it started communicating with me, I knew what it was saying. And what I would do is I would communicate back to it. So we had this kind of two-way conversation going. And then it said to me, come. And what it did was it took me within its womb. It took me to the events that happened before time began.